In this video, I want to show you another technique to create rainy mood effects. Just as an example, I found this image on internet and converted this image to this image. As you see, my reference image is totally clear and very bright. So I changed my color exposure and also color mood. I made it colder. Also added some overcast sky and few mist effects, and started to creating some rain effects in different depths. Note that in previous video I showed you how to create a simple rain effect with brush scattering. In this video, just as another practice, I will show you how to create another example. I want to mention also to you, do not freeze your brain. When you get mastered and skilled in tools and workflow, you will find the best solution for your project. Alright, let's start. This is my raindrop effects I generated in Photoshop. I want to show you how to create similar projects. I create a new document, file, new, or press Ctrl or Command N. And I set width for something like 4000 and for height 3000. 72 dpi is fine, and make sure your color mode is RGB 8-bit. Create. I need to fill black my background layer, so as it is white, simply press Ctrl or Command I to invert color, or go to the image, adjustment, and select invert. Or because my black color is set on foreground, press Alt or Option Delete or Backspace. So we have pure black layer. I create another layer, or I could duplicate it. Once press D from your keyboard or select default foreground and background colors. Make sure your layer is filled. Now go to the filter, noise, and add noise. Here we don't need color information, so make sure your monochromatic is enabled. For distribution, we have two types. It's not so different, uniform and Gaussian. And set the value as your desire. I think 60% is enough. Okay. I saw some people start immediately using something like motion blur with angle to create, but honestly, as you see, it is too dense and also it is not realistic. So we need to scatter more for particles. Also, we could increase our particle size. Now go to the image, adjustment, and threshold. We could here set our density less or more. I think something like that is fine. Note that because my image size is too large and maybe the information will miss in preview, press Ctrl or Command 1 or go to View menu and select 100% zoom to see exact values. Now go to the image menu, adjustment, and threshold. Now you could slide left to increase density or reduce that. I think this is fine, something like that. Alright. As you see, my points are too small. Of course, you could use that, it is fine. So just as a practice, I duplicate my layer and hide top layer. Select below layer. Imagine this is our far away raindrops. so they are too small and too dense. Now I'm going to filter, stylize, and wind. Here we have direction is not so important, left to right or from right to left. For the method we have wind, blast, and stagger. I think here blast and wind it is fine. Maybe blast is too intense, so I choose wind. Okay. If we need more, you could go to filter and find your last filter to repeat. In Photoshop CC you have to use Ctrl Alt F or Option Command F. I could repeat, undo that, it is too intense. So it is not bad. Still, you could reduce your scattering. If I go to image, adjustment, and threshold again, as you see, you could reduce and control amount. I think something like that is not bad. Alright. Unhide top layer. I want to create these particles larger. To do that, go to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. Not too much. Just try to create blurred out to get more blending with background color. I think something like that is fine. Okay. Now again, image and adjustment threshold. As you see now, our particles are growing and getting bigger. Maybe something like that, it is fine. Okay, I duplicate it again as a backup and hide it. So repeat it, filter, stylize, and wind. I think this time actually stagger could works better, but still you could use blast or wind. I use stagger. Wait until process finish. Alright, as you see, all my drops push to the left side, but no worry, I could simply hold on the Alt or Option key and drag, make copy. Also for overlapping, I could use eraser tool, press E, and start removing some part. I think this is fine. It is okay, don't take too hard. Alt or Option and Shift drag again to make copy. And this is fine. To merge these three layers together, you could select simply all these layers and merge down, or just go to the layer menu and press merge down or Ctrl or Command E. One, this is two parts, so again Ctrl or Command E, and now we have this. I press Ctrl or Command T and make it a bit larger to cover whole image. I want to show you here a very simple but useful trick. Note that this is my layer, and if I press Ctrl or Command T, as you see, rest of this image is out of my canvas. To remove the outer informations from this layer, press Ctrl or Command A or go to the select menu and select all. Now if I press C or enable crop tool and press enter or return, as you see, shown only these parts of your information will remain and the rest of the pixels will remove. So press enter or commit from toolbar. Now if I press Ctrl or Command T, we don't have any extra information. Alright. For next layer, I want to create these even bigger. So again, filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. Of course, there are other techniques to make it bigger too, but just I use these simple techniques. Okay. And note that when I'm blurring out my particles, some particles getting darker and some other particles remain almost light. With this simple technique also, automatically you reduce your particle distance, or better to say density too. And these particles are closer to camera, so for sure their density are less than far away. So it is ideal. Again, image, adjustment, and threshold. I think they are fine. You could increase more, but I think that's fine. Alright, again, filter, stylized, and wind. Maybe this time I use blast just to show you it's not so different. Press Ctrl Alt or Command Option F. That's fine. Now we need make them blur. To do that, it is very simple. Filter, blur, and motion blur. Because they are horizontal, so set on 0 angle. For closer distance, we need more blurriness, not too much to not destroy all information. Alright, okay, hide this layer. For next layer, filter, blur, and motion blur. This time, of course, less. Even if you need to create these particles more visible, we could go to the image, adjustment, and using something like brightness or better levels and curves. I press Ctrl or Command L and move the brighten side to the left. As you see, they're getting more visible. So there is no worry. That's fine. Hide this layer too. And for less particles, filter, blur, and motion blur. This time even less. I think this time our density is too much, so I press Ctrl or Command L, and this time using reverse, increase darker values to create less density. I think that's fine. Even you could use the midtone. Yep, that's fine. Alright. Now bring back all your layers, select them all. We need lighten information. So from blending option, select screen. Do not select lighten because some information will gone. Set on screen. And I could press Ctrl or Command T to rotate, or go to the image rotation and 90 degree. It doesn't matter clockwise or counterclockwise. I think we need diagonal, so I start from the larger one. Press Ctrl or Command T. I hold on the Alt Shift or Option Shift on Mac, make it bigger and create diagonal. As you see here, we have too much density, so I could simply drag it out. Alright. For next layer here, Ctrl T, hold Alt and Shift or Option Shift. And here we need some variation. And for the last one, Ctrl T. And maybe some other diagonals. Alright, now I could blend them all together or adjust them one by one. I could blend them, it is not so important, so select one of sides, hold on the Shift key, click another layer, Ctrl or Command E to merge them out. And make sure your blending mode is set on the screen. Alright, maybe a bit more blurriness, filter, blur, and motion blur. Something angle similar to that. Alright, this is fine. Now I will open my file. Alright, I open my previous video file. Let's say this time we don't need this rain effect. I will remove it. Also this adjustment. and simply you could drag it out here. Okay. Control T, and you could expand it, don't worry. Also, I made another version here with more variety. Here only I have a small difference with my previous generation. First of all, as you see, the variation angle is more, and also I made more tilt blur instead of simple motion blur only. What does it mean? Because usually your camera is below here and it is far from top side, so motion blur effect in close to the camera is much more than top side. So to do that, go to the filter in Photoshop CC, of course. Blur gallery, we have here tilt shift. Let me explain how it is work. Here is center, and here we have gap, and the spacing, you could of course make the spacing and rotation. I increase blurriness to explain you more. As you see, this is the core, and from here start to get fade out to here. I could expand it to make something like that. So because our camera is about here, I could move it up, expand it down, and of course create this tilt shift too, or just move it up, bring down, and of course you could decrease blur value here or from the right panel, doesn't important. See, this is before and after, and it is much more realistic and okay. And you could move this one, or I provided this file for you to able use that later. So I drag this file into my scene. Yes. And as you know, for blending mode, we should create something by screen. Don't set on lighten. See what's happening here? If you set on lighten, a lot of midtone values will lost. So always set on screen. Alright. Control or Command T and adjust it. I think this is not bad. Even you could expand it by holding Control Alt Shift, but I think it is not necessary here. Also note that something very important. When we have the rainy day, when raindrops fallen down and contact to the ground or any other surface, they will splash back. So if you like to create more realistic, better to create something like that. So I duplicate my layer, press Ctrl or Command T, I right click and flip vertical, and you could of course bring it down because we don't need too much. I hold on the Ctrl and Shift to make it more variation, and I start to make it smaller, something like that, no worries. And if you need, you could use mask and start with black color, brush, soft, start removing top parts, and even of course decrease opacity. See, I hold on the alter option and drag it, and of course I could create some depth effect. So hold on the shift, I right click and select flip horizontal to make more variation. Alright, I think it should a bit something like that. I'm creating some depth and more, and I could press Ctrl or Command E to merge them out, or simply hold on the Shift and Ctrl E, because I merged them all together so it can sit on screen. And you could use mask or eraser to remove some parts. Here I could create opacity less, Also for this one. And as you see, this is without splashback and this is with splashback. It is much more realistic. Also, even you could do same effect for all sides and edges, but because they are too far, usually not important. But just to show you, I duplicate it and move it up. Allow me to bring back opacity to be more visible. See, I set here. Even if you don't see, you could temporarily set the blending mode to normal. Alright, Control T, hold on the control and create something like that. Here and here. I just want to show you the splashback effect. Hold on the control and make more depth. Maybe something like that. It is not so important. Details, okay, now screen. And here are my layers. See, splashback, it is too large. Maybe create a bit more compact and smaller. Alright, I just hold it down, Control or Command. And even depth. See, it is very simple, but very looks realistic. All details create your image more and more realistic, and I could decrease the opacity. Also hold on the alter option and create a splashback for the other part. Of course, you need to make it smaller because it is far from camera. And something like that. Still, you could use eraser or brush for masking and start removing some top part. You see? Check here. I think maybe stronger better. And one more tip here. If you set opacity of layer 100% and still you need more, simply press Ctrl or Command J to duplicate. See? It is getting stronger. And now you could decrease the opacity. And of course using transform to create more variation. And even using mask for removing some parts you don't like. Oops, I think I used brush on layer, so on the mask, and start removing. So better to organize our layer, I select them all, press Ctrl G or create group. Double click on the name and write rain. Alright, so this is before and this is after. In the next video we will work on reflection on the surface.